So, welcome back to the Clarity Booster. Today, I want to talk about the difference between information and integration, the difference between knowing something and actually living it. Because every single client who comes to me arrives with the same question. I know what my patterns are. I know why I do what I do. So, why am I still doing it? And the answer is actually pretty simple. This is about the gap between knowing something and actually living it. That gap is where the unconscious comes into play. So let's talk about that for a moment, because to understand why we do things that don't make sense to us logically, we need to understand where they actually come from. Like your day to day, trying your shoes, making dinner, driving or walking home. You're not consciously thinking about any of that. You don't have to actively think about how to tie your shoes or which hand to use to, pour salt on in a dish or which turn to take next. You're doing this on autopilot. And it goes the same with most of our conversations, but also our reactions and even our decisions. This is what we call a trance. Not trance in the way you might be thinking. You're not unconscious or completely out of control, but you are operating from something deeper, like an invisible operating. I call it a script. Now, the script is basically the collection of everything you've learned to be true. Your values, your beliefs, your rules about the world. You created it from a very young age when trying to make sense of the world, and every experience you had since then has served to reinforce it. So, an example of the script in action is you walk into a room you've never been in, you see a table you've never seen before, and know exactly that's a table. That's thanks to your script, right? You didn't have to think about it or run an experiment to check that plank with four legs was a table. The script gave you that information. So, really, what the script does is it gives you the power of assumption. And it does this because the brain's number one goal is to save energy. And assuming is faster than thinking. Most of the time, that's incredibly helpful and useful. But sometimes the assumption is wrong or unhelpful. So think about what happens when your manager goes quiet, didn't a message or sent a shorter email than usual. The script scans the situation and fills with the most familiar story it knows, which can something is wrong and it's probably me. Or think about the person who receives feedback at work and something in them shuts down regardless of whether the feedback was fair or not. The script fills the gap to make sense of the situation. And it might go, I'm not appreciated, or I can't do anything right. Very dramatic script, but also very quick to work. It swoops in before the conscious mind had a chance to weigh in. Because the unconscious mind is faster than the conscious mind. It always gets there first. It's a bit like the insecure student eager to please giving all the wrong answers. So the power of assumption that helps you recognize a table is the same power that tells you an unanswered text means rejection or that fair feedback meant failure. It cannot tell the difference. It just pattern matches to what it already knows. And we spend roughly 70% of our day running on autopilot. The other 30% is when we're actively thinking, moments where we are using the logical part of our brain to create new rules, new learning that will eventually become automatic too. That's exactly how we create habits. So here's where it gets interesting. When you understand something intellectually, it lives in a conscious brain, the logic part, the thinking part of your mind. When you know something emotionally, instinctively, It lives in the unconscious mind, the deeper, older, and faster part of your brain. It doesn't require effort, it just happens. So think about what happens when you approach a traffic light, right? Your foot moves to the brake before you have consciously decided anything. You didn't think red means stop, stopping requires pressure on the brake pedals, etc. You just slow down because you've encountered enough traffic lights in your life that your body knows what to do. It doesn't need instructions anymore. That knowledge is not in your head, it's in you. Now, think about someone who knows logically that they are good at their job. The track record is there. Other people see it. They could even show you the proofs if you ask them. But the moment they have to do a presentation, the heart rate goes up, the doubt creeps in. And it's not because they forgot what they know, it's because knowing something in your head and the body actually trusting it are two completely different things. One is information, the other one is integration. And the patterns we are talking about today, the ones that keep running despite you knowing that pattern very well, they are not a logic problem. They live at the level of the traffic light, which means they can't be reached by thinking alone. That's the awareness gap between knowing and living, or information and integration. And that gap is why the question my clients ask, I know why I do this, so why am I still doing it, is actually the wrong question. Because knowing was never going to be enough. Now, the most common answer people are given is this: change the behavior. If you repeat a new behavior enough times, it becomes a habit. You use the logical part of your brain to create something new, and eventually it moves down into the automatic. And that does work for some things. Your morning routines, going for Sunday runs, or drinking more water. It works with things that aren't loaded. But when it comes to behaviors that carry a feeling with them, that's a very different story. The ones that hijack you in high pressure moments, you cannot think your way out of those because they're not coming from the thinking part. They're coming from a part of your brain that doesn't respond to logic, that doesn't care how many times you've journaled about it. That part has one job: keep you safe. So when pressure goes up, when something feels high stake, that part does exactly what it was built to do. It reads the situation as a threat and it pulls on the script. Remember, that script was written when you were small, a child trying to make sense of the world with the very limited information they had available. And what a child learns above everything else is what keeps them safe. So, if staying small meant avoiding conflict, the script makes you go quiet now. If achieving kept you loved, it makes you push beyond your limits. It feels like a flaw or self-sabotage, but it's actually doing exactly the job it was designed to do: keep you safe. The problem isn't that it's protecting you. The problem is that it learned what danger looked like when you were 5 years old, and it hasn't had the chance to update yet. So here is what I really want you to hear today. Going back to the question we started with. I know why I do this, so why am I still doing it? The answer is not that you haven't seen your pattern or that you haven't tried to shift the pattern hard enough. It is that most people, when the pattern runs, do the one thing that guarantees it keeps running. They judge themselves for it. They spiral about it. Why am I still doing this? I should know better. What is wrong with me? And it makes sense because when you have the awareness, when you can see the pattern happening anyway, it feels good to be able to stop it. But here's what's actually happening when you judge yourself. The judgment creates more stress. More stress It makes your unconscious believe you're in danger, which activates the script for protection. And the script produces more of the behavior we don't want. So instead of breaking the loop, you are feeding it. But I hear you. How do we stop judging ourselves for these behaviors we so desperately want to shift? So let me offer you a completely different way of looking at this. Think about an actor who plays a villain in a film, really commits to it, does terrible things on screen. And I always think of Christoph Waltz playing Hans Landa in Inglourious Basterds. It's always the thing that comes to mind. If you saw this actor in real life, you wouldn't walk up to him and shout at him for everything his character did in the movie. Because you understand, that wasn't really him. He was only following a script. In the moments that hijack you, you are that actor. You are playing a role from a script that was written a long time ago. And here's something important about that script. It made sense when it was written. The behavior that hijacks you now was the right response to something that happened then. It helped you make sense of the world, find your place, connect, avoid punishment. It was protection. It kept you safe. This is why these behaviors don't make sense now. They're not bad. They're just inappropriate, outdated. They served a purpose a long time ago. They just don't anymore. And the moment you stop punishing yourself for following a script, for being a character, something shifts. The script doesn't disappear, but you're no longer inside of it, looking out. You're outside it, looking at it. That means you're not in a trance anymore. You have a choice. So, what does this actually look like in practice? When the pattern runs, instead of asking, why am I like this? Ask this. What must I be believing right now for this reaction to make complete sense? If you believe that being challenged means you're not competent, of course you shut down in a meeting. If you believe that feedback means you're not enough, of course you took it personally. The reaction always makes sense. It just makes sense according to a belief that was formed a long time ago. So the reaction was not wrong. It was just running on a very old information. You're not struggling to change because you need to understand yourself more or because you need to force your behaviors harder. You're struggling because every time the pattern runs and you judge yourself for it, you feel the very feeling that created it. The judgment increases the stress activated the script keeps the pattern going. When you let go of the judgment, even slightly, even 5%, you move into curiosity instead. You create distance between you and the character you were playing. The nervous system settles. The script doesn't need to activate as hard. And for the first time, there's a gap between the trigger and the response. And that gap means choice. Choice of your response and of your experience. So, because I've spent the last 15 minutes telling you that you don't need to journal more or push harder to shift your patterns, it would feel really wrong right now to leave you with a journaling exercise. So, I'm going to leave you with this. The next time the pattern runs, and it will, don't ask why. Don't persecute yourself. Just remember, you're an actor following a very old script. And complete these 2 sentences to get yourself out of that judgment. This situation makes me feel like I am. Complete the sentence. And if I didn't feel this way, I would. That's it. That's where the distance between the character that you're playing and yourself starts. And with this, you can start acting from a place of choice.